Something just happened in January 2026 that most people haven't fully processed yet. It didn't come from Washington, it didn't come from Wall Street, and it definitely didn't come from the Federal Reserve. It came from the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now joined by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and others. They quietly flipped the switch on a new international settlement system, one that allows them to trade with each other without using the US dollar. They call it the unit. And here's the most important thing to understand right now. This is not a proposal. This is not a pilot program. This is not coming soon. The system is live, operational, and already being used for real cross-border trade. For the first time in nearly 80 years, the US dollar is no longer the only functioning option for large-scale international settlement. That changes everything. For your entire lifetime, the global financial system operated on a single assumption. If countries wanted to trade with each other, like oil, food, weapons, machinery, technology, they had to do it in US dollars. Not because the dollar was perfect, but because there was no alternative. The dollar wasn't just a currency. It was the infrastructure: pricing, clearing, settlement, reserves. Every road led back to the dollar system. What BRICS just did wasn't attack that system directly. They did something far more dangerous. They built a parallel one. New rails, new clearing mechanisms, new reserve logic, and then they opened it to nearly half the world's population. The dollar system still exists, but for the first time since Bretton Woods in 1944, it is no longer a monopoly. The era of zero competition is over. So what exactly is the unit? This is where most coverage gets sloppy. So let's be precise. The unit is not a circulating consumer currency like the dollar or euro. You won't be buying groceries with it. It is a supranational settlement unit designed specifically for central banks, state-owned enterprises, large cross-border trade contracts. Think of it as a neutral accounting and settlement layer sitting above national currencies. And its design is intentional. The unit is built on two foundational pillars, each solving a major problem that kills most alternative currencies before they ever scale. Pillar 1, gold anchoring. 40% of the unit's value is linked directly to physical gold held by BRICS central banks. Not paper claims, not ETFs, not derivatives, physical metal stored in sovereign vaults. This matters for one reason: trust. Gold is politically neutral. It has no issuer, no counterparty risk. It doesn't depend on elections, central bank credibility, military power. By anchoring part of the unit to gold, BRICS is signaling something very specific. This system cannot be inflated away on a whim. This is not a return to the classical gold standard. There is no one-to-one convertibility promise. Instead, gold acts as a credibility anchor, stabilizing volatility and signaling discipline. Pillar 2, a weighted currency basket. The remaining 60% is backed by a basket of BRICS national currencies: Chinese yuan, Indian rupee, Russian ruble, Brazilian real, South African rand, and now Gulf currencies through energy trade. This portion represents economic mass: combined GDP over $28 trillion, population over 3.6 billion people, control of energy, food, rare earths, manufacturing supply chains. This isn't theoretical strength, it's real production capacity. Together, the unit becomes something unique. 40% historical trust plus 60% future growth, stable enough to use and dynamic enough to scale. So why now? Why January 2026? The trigger wasn't inflation, it wasn't debt, it wasn't even geopolitics in the abstract. It was February 2022, when Western governments froze over $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves, money that Russia had earned, saved, and legally deposited in Western financial institutions, gone overnight. That moment sent shockwaves through every central bank outside the Western alliance, because the message was unmistakable. If your reserves are in our system, they are not really yours. China saw it, Saudi Arabia saw it, India saw it, Turkey saw it, and they all reached the same conclusion. Financial sovereignty had become a national security issue. The unit is not a declaration of war on the dollar. It is a defensive shield, a way to ensure trade, reserves, and liquidity cannot be frozen by foreign policy decisions made elsewhere. Now, does this work in practice? Yes, and we already have proof. As of January 2026, roughly 90% of trade between Russia and China is settled without the US dollar. Energy, machinery, technology, agriculture, all flowing through non-dollar channels. This isn't experimental, it's operational. Think of Russia and China as the stress test. The unit isn't inventing something new. It's standardizing what already works and scaling it across an alliance. Now let's talk about scale. because scale is what turns a technical solution into a systemic threat. BRICS nations now represent approximately 46% of global population, approximately 35% of global GDP, a majority share of global commodity production oil from Saudi Arabia to India, gas from Russia to China, food from Brazil to Africa. All of it can now settle outside the dollar system. That's the difference. And this brings us to gold, because every expansion of the unit requires more gold backing. BRICS. Central banks are already the largest gold buyers in the world. If unit adoption grows, even modestly, demand for physical gold becomes structural, not speculative. This is why major banks are quietly revising gold forecasts upward, not because of fear, but because of math, finite supply, persistent institutional demand. Gold stops being a hedge. It becomes infrastructure. So what does this mean for the United States? To answer that, you need to understand something called exorbitant privilege, because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. The U.S. borrows cheaper than anyone else, runs permanent trade deficits, exports inflation, uses sanctions as economic weapons. The unit doesn't destroy this overnight, it erodes it slowly. Every trade settled outside the dollar reduces marginal demand for dollars. Erosion, not collapse, but erosion compounds. The real shift happens with third-party nations. Countries like Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, Pakistan, Vietnam, heavily indebted in dollars, vulnerable to Fed policy, politically non-aligned. For them, the unit isn't ideology, it's leverage. Options change behavior. Now the biggest risk is internal fracture. BRICS is not unified culturally, politically, or strategically. China and India compete. Russia and China distrust. Democracies and authoritarian systems coexist. Monetary coordination is hard. The euro nearly collapsed with far more alignment. This is the unit's greatest weakness, but shared vulnerability can override differences. Fear is a powerful glue. So here's the bottom line. This is not the death of the dollar. It is the end of dollar absolutism. For the first time in 80 years, global finance has choice. And once choice exists, monopolies never fully recover. The rules are changing, quietly, gradually, irreversibly. Ignoring it is no longer an option. Do you think the dollar slowly fades or adapts and survives? Let me know your view below.